Welcome to You Can't Be Pretty and Smart, well, at least not at the same time. We are your hosts, Zacchary Powell and John Zambarano.
Today, we have a very full docket today, actually. We are discussing Traitors, the critically acclaimed television program, as well as Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Miss Megan Thee Stallion, and Beyonce.
We'll be diving into the concept of deception in astrology and the planets that rule it, the placements that provide one with the ability to deceive and deceive well, as well as the role of villains and villainization in the lives and depictions of queer and marginalized people. We're super excited about talk about this. It is such a cool topic that came to us and has just come into fruition. So yeah, let's dive in. John, how are you?
I am okay.
Yeah.
I've had it's felt like a long week and a half at work. But today I meant to tell you this in the pre-show.
Mm.
I got a really cool Mars omen, a very
Ooh.
good one. So we're recording with the this episode is going to be about Mars and Rahu. Basically, is like
Yes. Yes.
is the thing. The moon is with Rahu right now, and
Ooh. Yeah.
is in the sign of Mars. So
And is
it's
right. Is in
very
Aries.
appropriate
Yeah.
that we've done this.
Hmm.
It was moon hour, and I was
Yeah.
ringing somebody out. They
Yeah.
walk up to the register. They are wearing a black t-shirt that just says Mars on it.
Oh,
I was like,
Daddy, hi. That's
what the
crazy.
fuck?
That's so wild. I
I was like,
love
oh
that.
yeah, you fully are in my first house. That's so
Period.
true. Yeah, that's
Period.
yeah. So that was cool. Yeah, I'm feeling so the Mars, obviously Mars has moved into Gemini, our first. The Mars in Taurus was slow as fuck.
Mhm.
I'm definitely still feeling the work of
Yeah.
Mars, but it's doable.
Yes.
I'm
Yes. Yes.
not
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
don't
Yes.
feel like
Yes.
I'm moving through molasses.
Yeah.
I feel like I have the swiftness, the mercurial, okay, I have the
Yes.
movement and
Yeah.
wherewithal to get this shit done as opposed to just
Hmm.
being why is this taking 77 years to do?
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. I love. Um, I'm also doing well. Thanks for asking. Um,
I set it up here.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure, sure. No, I honestly, and this is what I did post about this on Instagram. I was like, when Mars moves into Gemini and the Sun moves into Leo, it's over for y'all bitches. And I was right. I was really right.
I stand by that.
I stand by it. I feel
I
fucking
ate that.
period. I loved the ingress of Mars into Gemini. I was like, fucking finally. I
Yeah.
think it's absolutely correct that I mean that Uranus conjunction took me out Mars and Taurus
Oh.
and with Uranus, and it just the rest of it was like the end of me being able to handle it, right?
Yeah.
I just was completely knocked out until kind of Mars went into Gemini, and I just I'm so thankful that finally it is here. It's also personally my Mars return,
Mhm.
and knock on wood, but this usually goes well for me. This is some an energizing moment when I
Mhm.
have this return. Even when it was retrograde, it really was really helpful that period of time. And so I am deeply excited about that. I'm excited about the dual concept of both Mars entering the first provide and in a better sign, providing a certain dignity shift that allows for perseverance and execution
Mhm.
and all of that to be more effective, number one. Number two, adding the idea of vitality through the sun in its own sign in a
Mhm.
fixed fire sign. There is just so much we can do with this sextile moment of the sun in Leo,
Mhm.
sextile by sign to Mars in Gemini. And I just feel like this is the moment we all need to if there's something you need to do and you need energy to do it and you weren't able to do it the
the,
last 6 weeks, this is it, mama.
the next
You've got
25 days.
yeah, you've got it. This
Yeah.
is a perfect moment to really execute on those things and to
Mhm.
be visible and to do it well and to all of that. And so I'm really jazzed. I'm really excited about what's going on, and
Mhm.
uh, I'm just ready, girl. I'm ready for things to shift, change, obviously, as you know, there's a lot going on in my life that are that's finally coming together as we
Mhm.
reach August 1st. And so I'm just ready for August to come into being and
Yeah.
to have a fresh start, a new
Mhm.
way forward, which is really great.
Mhm.
Um,
Speaking of August, a little birdie might have told me that you maybe you're doing something special.
Oh yeah, no, I mean like, well, before we dive in, we can discuss a few updates. Yeah. So one of the things, obviously, that I'm doing is I'm doing a Leo season sale. And so for the period of Leo season, so I'm actually ending it like August 22nd. But from now, right, when you guys are hearing this, to August 22nd, I am doing a sale where $40 off all of my readings.
Mm.
And so, I do Venus readings, which are like, we look at your Venus placement. We look at the moon, even. We look at your lot of Eros and your fifth house and kind of like talk about your experiences with pleasure, with joy, with fun, with playfulness, with sex, with relationships, all of it, and kind of come to a conclusion about like how we can move forward and help those like things go well and to kind of like come up with a narrative of how things have previously gone and how we can kind of like move things forward and in a more productive way and to help out with those things if
Mm.
that's something that's difficult. I'm also doing locational astrology readings, which are looking at like how our charts shift when we're either visiting or moving to a different location, and how beautiful that work is. And it can also highlight, honestly, interestingly enough, where you have positive relationships with people,
Hmm.
where you kind of like have strong, like one thing that's really interesting is like I connect with Australians like every single, like the moment I meet one, bam, we're friends. And I have Venus like on an angle in Australia. Right? Like
Mm.
it's like a very like of course I can make connections with people from Australia. Like there's even people who like are really, really into K-pop. They have beautiful charts in South Korea. Like it's just like there it like it's just really
Oh, I'm
interesting.
gonna
So
have to check my
right?
Korean
No,
relocating chart
exactly.
now.
And so it's just this really fascinating thing where it's even if you're not, because obviously traveling is very expensive, moving even to a different place within your own country or within, a
Moving
small
period.
period of
Moving down
space,
the street.
moving, yeah, right down the street is
Expensive.
is is expensive. But like, you know, even the concept of like who you can connect with and who's like can be a helpful ally and where they kind of come from, you start to notice like, oh, that person's from that place, and my chart in that place is really, really positive for
Mm.
doing this work with people. It's really fascinating. I love that work. I also, of course, do natal readings, like year ahead kind of reading. I do a combo of the natal and year ahead because that for me, I just like the combo.
Yeah.
As and then sorry, lastly it was oh my God. Oh, so my favorite.
I
So
was like the
the
one. There's the
one.
one you're forgetting.
The Surf of the Stars readings, which are about basically connecting with the gods and the deities and who might be best for you to engage with at the moment based on your chart, based on the transits that are going on, but most specifically or most importantly, like what your goals are. A lot of people I think forget like I've done a lot of these readings, the Surf of the Stars readings, because I've loved them so much, and people seem to enjoy them as well. And one thing that people tend to get mixed up with is like the goal they have and the nature of the planet they think is the right one to go to. Many people think, and like as we talked about, like I think our last episode, yeah, we were talking, or no, the first episode. Um, Mars is not vitality, my love. Like if you want to get something done, certainly like that is helpful. But like if you are feeling exhausted, perseverance Mars can provide, but not more energy, right? Like maybe you are tired for a reason, and maybe you should actually address that as a way to bring yourself to success, right? So like I'm really, really good at like discerning like what the real address like thing you need to address to get to your goals. And that's something I really love helping people to
Mhm.
engage with. Is coming up with those practices of remediation and devotion to like help them on their journey through life. What about you, John? I fear you're doing something.
Oh,
Oh,
yes. So I will be offering a new session. Your
tell me all
deity.
about it.
Oh my God. So it's called the Deity and Devata session.
Oh, period.
And basically what we do is we focus a lot on the Vedic chart and the D9 and the D20,
Oh,
which is the chart of spirituality and
hmm.
worship,
Yeah,
and the D9 chart of the soul, etc. I feel like
hmm.
we talk about the D9 a lot. So
You do.
and we look at those your natal chart, your D9 and your D20, and we discern like who is trying to contact you or who can you contact.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
talk about the Ishta the chosen deity, a lot. Like who is the planet that's gonna or who is the god that's gonna pick up the phone first when you try to
yeah,
like make any sort of contact.
yeah.
What dasha are you in? Maybe
Mm.
oh, you're in a Saturn dasha? oh, okay, maybe that's why your connection to like Venus or Jove is like not as strong right now, is
Yeah, right.
because
It feels kind of
Saturn is
shitty.
like on
Yeah.
your throat. Sure, 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 sure. So yeah, we talk about it's mostly rooted in the Vedic chart. We will look at the Western chart somewhat, mostly for like asteroids for any kind of like confirmation
Sure.
or secondary kind of like reassurance. Like,
Sure.
oh yeah, you have the asteroid Persephone conjunct your moon, and sure, yeah,
Mm,
she's probably your pollen Devata. Absolutely, why not?
yeah.
And also maybe some fixed star parents if you're like a fixed star girly. But yeah, mostly rooting in the Vedic, the D9 and the D20, and seeing what deities and what Devatas are going to be there to talk to you the easiest.
Yeah.
It's a really cool session. I did a few test ones. I think I've maybe done 5 so far, and they've all
Mm,
gone really well. So now I will be launching them to the public at some point in Leo season when I get a good election.
love.
So yeah. Apart from that, I'm not doing any sort of a sale or anything. Sorry, Divas.
No. Hey,
But
totally fine.
I do a combination of natal and timing readings as well. I can't do just natal readings. It like bores me to fucking death.
The same.
I'm like
Because there's so much more.
Yeah.
Like and I've had so many readings where it's like, if this was only about your birth chart, like we would have like, yes, there's so much to talk about, but
Sure.
like
But
there's
like
so much. It's in you. You did not drop out of a coconut tree. You live in the context. But like seriously, like it is all in context. Like it all matters, like what's going on around, because your birth chart can say certainly things about your life experiences, and also
and it does.
the
It does
transits.
actually. Yes.
It does. No, it does. But the transits tell you why you're here right now
Yeah.
and why
The
you're
transits
struggling
and the
and what you're
timing
looking for.
and all of that shit. Yes.
Like that. Like that's what comes up the most when like astrologers are like asking you questions. Like all of a sudden, turns out you're going through a really difficult transit, and that's why you're here, right? Like you came for a reason, and clearly that's what it is. Yeah.
Turns out you're in a Saturn dasha. Crazy.
Yeah,
That's why you're
crazy.
miserable.
Well, and also, like going back to your deities and devatas talk. Oh my God. Your reading, like one thing that's really interesting about the Ishta, which is the deity that you can like kind of go to first and like immediately have access to without much. They're right there, kind of. As
Whether
opposed
you
to,
know
like,
it
the
or
Dharma,
not, they've been
they're
there
right
the
there.
whole time.
Like as opposed to the Dharma Devata, which is far more formal and takes a lot more work. But like the Ishta Devatas, so like one time, so like my story that I love about Ishta Devatas is my friend in Paris when I was living in Paris. I like Aphrodite came to me and was like, maybe you should just like, I don't know, show him like a Venus devotional practice, because he like was talking about wanting to be in relationships, and he was like really discovering his polyamory, and there was all this stuff he was discovering at the same time. And she was like, maybe you should just tell him. And I was like, well, I don't know if he would be into that. Like, who's to say? And she's like, yeah, who's to say? Maybe you should bring it up. And I was like, okay, girl. And so I
she's
bring
like,
it up.
she's like, I'm saying, actually.
I'm saying, who's to say? Me. And so I ended up like mentioning it to him, and he was like, oh, okay. And then we got together on a Friday, and we did a Venus ritual, and it like changed his life. He's to this day still does a weekly devotion, at least a weekly devotion to Aphrodite every Friday. And while when it was starting this, when he was like doing this like regularly, like when he fell in love with it, I like had to look. I was like, let's just see what's going on. Who is this Ishta? Venus in Libra. In Libra.
Oh, so it's like
in the D9.
It's like Venus.
Yeah, it's like Venus. It's Aphrodite. Absolutely. So it was just like very, very loud, very, very funny. It was like, of course, like she was right there, and she was waiting for the moment that he asked for help.
Yeah.
And then he had a really, really powerful Venus retrograde in Leo experience that brought him into a whole new place with his relationships, and now he's doing really, really well. So like, like these kinds of things, like these kind of techniques, looking at these these techniques can really help to find who can help you through this journey, through life, through struggles, through relationships, through work, all of that. And yeah, it's like that's one of my favorite like Ishta stories. Is like, of course, Venus was just waiting for him to say hello.
Yeah. Love. Yeah. When we talk about Meg eventually at some point.
Today.
I mean today. Eventually in the next like hour and a half. We'll be like, oh, all of her deities are connected to the nodes, and all she does is snake imagery. That's crazy.
Oh, interesting. Crazy. Literally wild. Really wild.
Who'd have thunk? And so that's what we're doing individually.
Yes.
And then
Together
as a unit.
we have an announcement, kids. Here we are announcing.
It's time to open the Patreon.
What are we doing? What's going on?
We're opening the fucking Patreon.
Oh.
I'm really excited. I think it's gonna be super cute. Our Patreon will open as this episode releases.
Yes.
Whenever that is.
I have some ideas. But yeah.
Yeah, no, there will be like an election, like for sure.
Yeah, sure.
But it will
which is part of it.
Which is
interestingly enough.
But it will be concurrent to the release of this episode.
Yeah.
Zach, let's talk about what are the two tiers?
So we have two tiers. We have the Hermes tier and we have the Saraswati tier. Hermes and Saraswati, if you don't know, are the two gods that kind of like came to us rather loudly as a way to make this this podcast. Saraswati was very powerfully in the not only the Vedic, in like the chart, both tropically and Vedically, but also in the D9 of the Vedic chart. She was proudly there.
The Saraswati combination is
loud
and loud.
And we didn't really even mean to do that. It was just
we elected the pod using a tropical
chart.
It was exclusively a tropical election.
Exclusively.
And then we were like, let's just look at the Vedic chart.
And all of a sudden she was like, hello, what's going on?
Yeah.
And the other thing, Hermes was the other. I mean, like, Hermes came through so loudly once Mercury moved into Gemini for us. Like, that's when this whole, like, real ideation of this project came through. And then, like, it just so naturally came to the pinnacle of, like, the Mercury Casino was our first recording. Like, it was just, that's what it was. So those are our two really prime deities for this podcast. And so we wanted to honor them by providing two tiers. The first tier is the Hermes tier. That is the $3 tier. And this is going to be basically support for us. And it's going to have, we're going to do an intro video about our podcast, about like the election, talking more about what we were just talking about, and as well as like providing like the availability for people to ask questions about stuff that we've said in our podcast, for people to make commentary and share relevant stories about their placements or about their experiences with different transits that we'll talk about, like that like kind of relates to the last podcast that we had, and then that we can kind of bring up in the next podcast as well. And so that would be like the base tier. And then the second tier will be the $7 tier, the Saraswati tier, where we're going to share like each election that we kind of choose for both recording and for putting out the pod. Sharing the elections and why we chose them, and like discussing why we liked the chart and what we kind of were doing, what were our limitations and what we therefore had to like wrestle with. This is not great, but this is, and like how do we choose between that, kind of like doing kind of electional, a little bit of teaching of electional.
Famously, electional astrology is not about choosing a good chart, it's about choosing the least bad chart.
The least bad, yeah, famously. And eventually on this tier two, what we're going to do is eventually have like a tune-in live kind of format where you can, while we're recording, you can join us in that kind of experience. We're really excited about
comment along.
We want to get a few more episodes in to kind of like get our rhythm a little bit better before we introduce other people. But that's an eventual that's like a soon eventual within the next few months. That's what we want to add into it. So those are our two tiers. If you want to support us, go to our Patreon. We'll have a link in the show notes in the below in the YouTube description, as well as in our bios.
I'll figure out how to make one of those like YouTube button things.
Okay, right. It's right.
It's on one of the sides.
It's over there.
It's somewhere up there.
It's somewhere. Anyway, but yes, that's where we're. You can provide support for us so that we can continue doing this great work, continuing to bring. What we want to do is obviously bring on guests as well, and so continuing to do this work, continue to support this work, because we are racing through our lives with other work that we're doing, with our astrology work and with this podcast, and this would greatly support us queer people, struggling through unprecedented times. Mama, housing,
just
food,
a coconut tree.
Period. Have no context.
No.
Anyway,
context never matter.
Who is she? I don't know her. So anyway, that's what we wanted to share. join us in our readings and our sales and on our Patreon, and we will see you there. But let's dive in. So the first day, John, this is you. Sorry, this is you.
Traders.
The show traders.
I'm fucking hooked. Okay. Shout out to my bestie Tim, who recommended that I watch Traders because I'm a Housewives girly down. I'm obsessed with them. As Zach says, have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Housewives, which thank you. But it's all these celebrities, or at least in the recent season, it was all celebrities. In some seasons, it's like normies. Some seasons, it's half normies, half celebs. This recent season of Traders US is all celebrities. They live in this castle together. And it's basically, if you're a Gen Z person, it's like Among Us, but in real life. If you're a millennial or older, it's like the game Mafia.
Yes.
It's like my two kind of like reference points.
That's a good point. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. All these people live in a house together. A few, maybe one, maybe five, are chosen to be the traders.
Yeah.
They meet every single night and choose to kill somebody.
Yeah.
Someone gets the chop. The next morning, they all link up and they're like, oh my God, Zach died. And you're like, oh my God, I wonder who the traders are. And then they meet that night. They have every single person in this house meets in the banishment room. And they have
other than the person who died, who's banished from the game, essentially. Yeah.
And they have to meet and conglomerate and basically try to decide who they think the traders are to vote them out. But the traders are there and trying to like throw them off their trail or like whatever they can do to try to make it to the end of the game. So the point is to get to the end of the game. Yes. If you get to the end of the game and they all unanimously decide that, oh my God, there's no more traders left. And there really isn't. They all split the money that they've earned.
Right.
If they make it to the end and there's even a single trader who's sneakily Rahu'd their way and disguised themselves and made it to the end.
Foreshadow.
They win all the money. All the money, which is crazy.
Yeah.
My Scorpio ass is like, I would win this game. I would be the best trader and I would demolish this fucking game.
Meanwhile, and it turns out half of the people in the game have traditional planets in Scorpio.
The ones that did it well, the ones that played the game well, all had Scorpio placements somewhere.
Yes.
I'm sitting with my little Cancer sun partner ruled by Cancer Mercury, and he's like, I don't know if I'd be able to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I'd kill you first.
Yeah, you're so right. You'd be gone.
It's a great show if you haven't watched it. I've only watched the US seasons. I have not watched outside of that. I've heard, so my friend Tim, who introduced it to me, said he's watching, who has Rahu in the first conveniently, is watching, going through all of them. He just said Traders Australia is like the pinnacle of the show. He said Traders Australia season 2 is like the best season. So if you guys want to dive in and listen, I would love to talk more people about this program. So
I will say so I did watch it too. I didn't watch the full thing, but I did watch enough to get
a significant amount.
Yeah. It is giving camp. Like of any show that I've watched.
The hostess, Miss Alan Cummings.
Alan Cummings
is a camp icon. Right.
It's like, I will say, like, I can see, like, there's a certain level of that takes me out of the show of like, I can see the performance. Like, I see, like, Alan performing is not my problem. The people on the show performing, I'm like, oh, come on, mama. Like, it's a bit much. You're laying on thick. But people love that shit. They really do. I feel like that's what, it's interesting because I think that's what reality television has become. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that in a neutral, that's what it is. Like, it has become less
real.
Less real. It is no longer the real world. It is truly like the Kardashians performative. Like, everything is actually like planned. There's kind of like, and not everything is planned, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a performance that everyone's engaged in.
And like, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole because I feel like I could talk about this for like hours, but like reality TV pre and post the advent of like social media and the iPhone is like so different. Wildly different. Like, you go back and you watch The Housewives, like the first few seasons of like The Housewives of New York. It feels so authentic because there's the only cameras are the cameras that are filming them. They don't have like, then when you get to the later seasons, they're like, oh, like, obviously not explicitly, but they're like, how is this going to be perceived like on Instagram or
and also like they're thinking about the clips of the moment that is going to be clipped to be put online, right? Like, they're thinking about the moment, they're coming up with lines to say.
They're separating themselves from like the immediacy of it being real.
which is just an interesting shift. I just think that's very, very, which is related to what we're talking about, which
Right.
is this concept of like deception, right? Like that's the
Deception.
whole point of this show, is literally to find out who is being deceptive and is actually causing disruption, right, to the space. And
And
so
if you're a traitor, it's to deceive
it's
until
to
you make
deceive,
it
right? Their job is to
until you make
deceive.
it to the end.
Yeah, yeah. And so, of course, there are like three. There could be more. We could say like Saturn is also involved in this, but like Saturn is mentioned in ancient texts on this, but like the ones that we like that are certainly always mentioned are like Mars, Rahu, and then definitely Mercury too.
Mercury to an extent.
One thing about the Mercury, like I remember in Valens, like Valens was like Mercury plus Venus in the sign of Mars, slut. Like literally, like would constantly cheat on you. Was like never gonna be like find love. They're just gonna. It's like, of course, that's just how the ancients talked. Because they needed to. Everything was extreme. You died young. Got it. I got it. We understand. So Mercury.
I'm not going to say what I was going to say. No,
Okay, good.
Keep going.
So Mercury is involved in this, right? But what we kind of have found in our research is that like Mars-Rāhu seems to be the archetype, the archetypes plural, that and the Mars-Rahu like conjunction or within the same sign has really been coming through for us in our research to create this podcast. So that's where we're going to be focusing our energy. And one thing that happened that was like a key concept of what we were thinking about, because villains for queer people are kind of like heroes, right? There's this like there's in the past in many Disney movies and like many Disney movies, the villains are queer. Like they are queer coded. They like literally Ursula was her inspiration was divine, was
Divine, who has a Mars-Rāhu conjunction.
Mars-Rāhu. Right, exactly. She's literally like, and she's a famous drag queen, and she was the inspiration for this villain. Scar, Jafar. I mean, they're so gay. They're so queer. They are just so queer, right? And so we were thinking about like as we're doing like coming again. We talk about this every time, but like it really is. We are like divinely led to these things that seem to want to be talked about, and it's like what it kept coming through is like this Mars-Rāhu concept. And in this show, so like one of the first episode of Traitors, the first person to leave is Peppermint, who is also famous.
Peppermint is the first one to get
banished.
The first one the group almost unanimously decides is a traitor and has to leave.
Yes, they're saying she's the traitor. She has to go because she's killing everybody, right? She's going to kill everyone. So they're saying she is the deceiver. She is the traitor. She's the one causing the problem. And
she is not. Also, she's not.
Right. And so that's what happens, right? We go through this whole process and it's literally based on one thing that was said where she was just, honestly, she was performing. She was doing a dramatic, what do you mean? Right? Like, so someone says, because they were talking about good outfits. There's one person, Trishelle, who is actually the worst person in the world. This white, blonde hair, blue-eyed woman, horrible person. And she says, well, they're saying like, what was it? Oh, Peppermint was saying, like I have a lot of looks that I want to like show throughout the show. So hopefully I stay here. And then Trichelle's like, well, yeah, me too. But and they're like, fake competing with each other in that regard because Peppermint, first of all, would win.
I was like, first of all, it's not a competition.
It's not a competition. And then two, so then what Trishelle, oh my God, Trishelle says is, well, if I'm killed tonight, we know you're the traitor. And then Peppermint goes, what? Oh my God. That's it. That's the entirety of it. Like she's like, oh, gasp, mouth agape, performing, like not actually real shocked, like whatever. But Trishelle runs with this and like tells
who does not get killed.
We're gonna get to that. I'm so annoyed. Who runs with it tells everybody. I had this moment of Peppermint. She said, like, this is what happened. This is what happened. She must be a traitor. She must be a traitor. Everyone. She like literally spreads this lie to everyone. And we get to the moment of the banishment so someone gets killed. Obviously, it wasn't Trishelle. So, okay. why are we still talking about Peppermint? And then Trishelle, at the morning that after someone gets murdered, it's Johnny Bananas. Sorry. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler, Johnny Bananas, first one killed.
Johnny Bananas. And which everybody loves. This is like this guy who has lots of cancer placements. Of course, everybody loves him. Anyway, so because they think he's so sweet. And so
also Wood.
Mama Wood. Italian, very cancer Italian man. It was, yeah.
It hits right here for me. Like,
I'm sure it does. And so so someone, that's who gets killed, right? And in the morning, they all have breakfast together to see who gets killed. No, they're all three people at a time.
Between like 1 to 3 walk into the room at a time. Yeah.
And to be like, oh my God, I'm alive. You're alive. Oh my God. Oh. And then, so the last one who comes in is Peppermint. One of those last 3 are Peppermint. And they're like, oh my God, it's Johnny Bananas. And then she's like, oh, what? Johnny Bananas? And like shocked, right? So then anyway, we're not going to say who the traitors were, actually, but because
why? They tell the first episode, they show you who they are.
You're so right. Anyway, basically, at this breakfast, Trishelle says, I had this moment with Peppermint. And then Peppermint is like, what are you talking about?
Literally.
Like, literally, what do you mean? And she was like, I might be slaying you with these looks, but I'm not a traitor. That's what she does. She does like a little, I may be slaying you with these looks, but I'm not murdering you. I'm not the traitor. And then Trishelle just runs with this, continues to run with this one fucking story. And we get to the end, we get to the like banishment moment where everybody's voting and they're going back. People are like, this sounds ridiculous. They're like, this doesn't even make any sense. Like what, like people are saying this. And then other people are like, well, I don't know. We have nothing to go on. And this is the story that Trishelle has and like, blah, 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 blah. And then
it's literally an example of groupthink. Like,
yeah,
this one white woman is like, this one thing happened and everyone's like, okay. We've been here for like 48 hours and
like how is that enough? But apparently
it also doesn't help that Peppermint is the only one from her franchise, so a lot of them get, like there's a few housewives, there's a few people from the challenge,
that's true, from Survivor. Right,
Peppermint is the only
alone
girl.
She's also the only queer person and
not
openly true. Who else is queer on that show?
Parvati.
Oh, I had no idea. Oh, okay. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, one of 2 queer people on the show.
I think it just might be the 2 of them.
Sorry. For those who are not watching, I put up 2, which is a peace sign, which is a sign on Zoom that like leads to balloons. So anyway, happy Pride. So that was hilarious. Oh my God.
Yeah, but I do think it is just, I think it's just part.
That's just true. And then especially she's the only openly trans person on that show, right?
She's a black trans woman. Like,
black trans woman.
Lots of strikes already.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the very few black women on the show too. So it's just, I don't know, there's a whole host of marginalizations that she's layering on top that is leading to this moment where, and the episode is leading to this, constant, nonstop Trishelle moments of her insidiously saying these comments. This one thing that didn't even make any sense, that was literally nothing to her. And it's about Peppermint. And so we get to this moment and people are saying this is really ridiculous. I don't even understand. And Peppermint gets really angry and you can see her being triggered, like she's being brought back to high school. Like you can feel it. And everybody's playing, like Trishelle and Peppermint like both play their quote unquote role so well in this, right? Trishelle, and I don't mean that in like it's planned. I just mean like it is literally like an actual villain, Trishelle, like a white woman who is being very nefarious. And like not just the game nefarious, like she has now at this point at the end of this episode become deeply like problematic at this point. Mm-hmm. She hasn't said anything, but like it's the way she's acting and the way she's going after her.
All of the subtext that has happened is like,
you're a bad person. You can figure it out right away, right? And she was just like, and so like, Peppermint's getting really upset and heated, and she's like I'm speaking, and she puts her hand up, and Trishelle goes, don't put your hand in my face, that's disrespectful, and like freaks out. Like, so again, playing the role of the aggrieved white woman, and like the actual like a pretend aggrieved white woman and the actually aggrieved trans person, black person, who's like literally like traumatized from this like being. And one of the things that she says is like, I don't like to be called something I'm not. This like concept of like integrity and someone not being able to see that you have integrity, right? This like this nerve-wracking thing, which is what queer people experience all the time. You know, like many of us have experienced where you're in school and you don't want to be outed, and someone says that like you're gay, and you're like, no, I'm not gay. Like it's this trigger of this moment. And you can see it. You can see it happening in real time. And then yes, they vote. They almost unanimous. Almost. It's maybe three people who vote for someone else.
Out of the 20 of them, 17 of them, I'm pretty sure, vote for Peppermint.
Yeah.
So like obviously one of the three that doesn't is Peppermint, and I forget who the other two are.
Yeah. And so they vote her out, and she says, I'm a faith. So like she goes to the thing, and they're like, you have to reveal if you're a faithful or a traitor. And Trichelle's like, oh my God, I'm gonna feel so bad if she is not actually, a traitor. And it turns out, obviously, she's
not a traitor.
She's not a traitor. And they get back, and she's like, oh my God, like, I can't even believe, like, whatever. And they go back to the house, and everybody's, like, ganging up on Trishelle. Like, that was fucking crazy. Like, why the fuck did you do that? Like, if that wasn't even a thing, like, what did it? And she, again, performs her role so well. White woman tears immediately, she's like, I have to go. And she goes to her room, goes to bed for the rest of the night. Cut to the end of the show. I'm not going to say who wins. She gets to the end. This woman feels so aggrieved. Oh my God, I can't believe I did all this thing that, like, okay. And what she did first was go after the most marginalized person in the entire group. That's like the nature of, that's what she did, right? As a way to stir this concept of deception through the most marginalized person. And it was through this show, because I had seen clips, and it was through this clip, like John wanted to talk about traitors, and I was like, I think we should talk about traitors and villains. Like, I think that's really interesting, in queerness and all that. And then I had seen clips of Peppermint talking about at the reunion, saying like, as a trans person, like with nothing, with everybody in this group, a group think, with not much to go off of, people fall into their biases. And that is exactly what happened, right? Everyone perceived a Black trans woman as the most likely to be deceptive without even realizing it, or potentially realizing it and knowing what they were doing and actively doing it, right? And that kind of, for me, is what was like, oh, we have to talk about this more and like really wrestle with the idea of queerness, deceptive placements in one's chart, and like what that means, right? Like the deception is not always nefarious, right? The other part of deception is safety. Like as queer people, we have had to deceive people, saying we are perhaps not queer, as a way to keep ourselves safe from the people at school or from home or from whoever, having to hide who we really are, and as a way. So these placements that are in our chart that represent deception potentially are a representation of our. Again, we talk about this, like our chart is a representation of our life experiences. And so if it's a representation of our life experiences, having deception placements for queer people makes sense, because many of us have had to hide things.
There's not a single queer person who I personally know in my life who was like, from a very young age, I was just like out and queer, and everyone was fine with that.
That's a very rare, I mean, not so rare for younger folks now, but like for us, like it just wasn't it was never our life experience.
Yeah.
And so like we wanted to like delve into this idea, and the myths basically. So John, please talk about like the myths in Vedic about like Rahu and Ketu, and this idea of deception, and like the story of the mythology of the nodes.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because, so I don't know, I feel like in the Western traditions, we like don't really have a reason why the nodes are there, other than being like,
yes,
this is where the eclipses are happening.
Yes.
That's like really the only thing.
Which is why Demetra has often said, like, honestly, girl, we don't have enough. Like, I don't have anything to say to you about the nodes. I don't even know if they're lunar nodes. It's the moon's nodes. I think she said, I think at Norwalk, don't quote me, but I'm almost 100% sure. But I think she said at Norwalk this year, she was like, honestly, they're the lunar nodes. I'm not convinced they have any impact on the planets. Because there's from the Hellenistic tradition, Western, like the Hellenistic tradition. Right. She's like, there's just not much there. So so that's why we're talking about this, like the myth of Rahu and Ketu is more relevant in the Vedic tradition.
Yeah. I think Lily maybe is like
Oh, yes.
The Eastern people talk about the
Yes.
nodes being a dragon, and like that's it.
Yeah.
Like that is like the bare bones. And then there's got to be some like medieval Islamic kind of
absolutely.
fusion with.
Well, and there is mention of it, but not to the extent that Vedic provides.
There's no mythology connected to it. They're like this serpent like obscures the sun and the moon, I think. Like I don't really know.
Yeah.
So the myth of Rahu and Ketu is honestly one of my favorites. I think it's really cool. The shorthand kind of Spark Notes version is Rahu and Ketu used to be a singular serpentine being called Svarbhanu was the name. Svarbhanu was the direct attendant to Venus or Shukra, because Venus was the guru to the Asuras, who was kind of like the demons, but like they're not all Vedic. They're
not like, Western demons.
Yeah.
Not the Western
nothing is like good or bad. Like we need to remove the idea of like good and bad.
Yes.
Like they're just like the demons are about the physical and the gods are about the spiritual. The demon, like it's very like
so like
below
Venus,
the earth and above the earth.
Yes, and Venus is the guru, the teacher, the leader of the
guru,
demons.
the sage to the demons. Jupiter, Brahaspati, is the guru to the gods, the Devatas.
Yeah.
So all the Devatas are basically lining up to drink the like immortal nectar of life. I feel like that idea comes from a lot of traditions where the gods have to become immortal somehow. So they're all going to like get their drink their nectar, and like, oh my god, this is so fierce. Svarbhanu disguises himself as a god, as a Devata, sneaks into line, little sneaky serpentine boy sneaks into line, is like, I'm gonna become immortal. Fuck yeah. I forget if it's Vishnu. I think it's Vishnu. I forget. It's Vishnu or the sun. It's one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's Vishnu. Notices, like, looks over and is like, I don't recognize that one really, and is like, oh fuck, that's not a deity, basically. Takes his chakram or his disc, throws it, severs the demon in half, but the demon has already drinking the nectar, which is why Rahu and Ketu become who they are. We've got the head and the body, the severed immortal being, this like serpentine dragon kind of being that I'm pretty sure it's the sun actually who outs them, because that's why they cause the eclipses, is because the sun is like back at the sun is like they're fake and Vishnu is like got it and severs them. I'm pretty sure that's actually what happens. I think it's like a combo of the sun and Vishnu, because Vishnu is linked to the sun. Anyway, the sun basically outs Svarbhanu as not a demon. Vishnu severs him. That's why Svarbhanu is kind of perpetually outs him as not a god, not a demon, right? Sorry, yes, as not a god, as a demon.
Yeah.
And that's why he's kind of like perpetually pissed off at the sun, and that's why the eclipses happen.
There we go. Yeah.
Is basically what it is. And so thinking about literally this idea of deception and having to disguise yourself and pulling the wool over somebody's eyes. This idea of eclipses, when the light, when the thing that allows us to see and take in information is obscured, you don't know what the hell is going on. Anytime I have anyone who is not like super astrologically invested ask me about why eclipses are bad, I'm like, okay, picture this. You're a medieval peasant. It's 11 in the morning. The sun and all of a sudden,
and you have no intellectual, like, where does this come from? How does it happen?
Either A, you've become blind because you've been staring at it for so long.
Absolutely.
Or B, you're like, I was just tilling the fields and now I can't see anything because the sun is fucking black.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That is probably the most disorienting thing that will ever happen to you in your lived experience.
Yeah.
Especially without the knowledge of like astronomy and like eclipse. Like,
yes. So it became a malefic or bad, like very difficult.
It's a malefic omen. Like, especially there are so many, like, we have so far divorced ourselves from like the nature, like the rhythm of nature.
Yes.
And the idea of like, you know how us at this point, we can look at the moon and be like, the moon is waxing and probably almost full. And other people are like, what, how do you know that? And I'm like, because I'm more in tune with like,
I'm literally paying attention.
Basically every single person a long time ago was like, oh, the moon is like this full, that means we're like this far through the month, and like that's how you kept time. That's how
even the Farmer's Almanac to this day gives you suggestions of when to plant and when to sow, like when to do all of these things based on the moon,
based on the
And so like the disconnection, I mean, like this is like what capitalism has provided, right? A disconnection
The
not
light
only
bulb.
from ourselves and from our like from each other, but also from nature and from how we get our food. Like farmers actively pay attention to like all nature. Like, you know, it's small term farmers. Large scale farmers are doing a very different job, but a lot of the small scale farmers, there's a lot of like paying attention to what's going on, like moon-wise, sun-wise, weather-wise, like all of that, and with the earth, like how are the crops doing, right? Like that connection, that direct connection to what you're eating and what you're also providing other people, right? Because that's the other thing too. Like one can take on the risk themselves, but also taking on the risk for other people and whether
Feeding more
they,
than yourself.
yes, right? So like that's a deep, deep connection to what's going on. And capitalism, like through trade, through all these things, removing us from ourselves, from our community, from the food, and from all that is around us. Like I think that's one of my favorite things about astrology is like one time, I remember I was in Paris and I think the moon was applying to Jupiter. And I like go
To
out
conjoin Jupiter.
conjoin Jupiter, yeah. And I said to my aunt, I said, I showed her the chart because it was at the midheaven too. And I said, so like see at like the top, like this is the chart showing her the physical chart or
Yeah.
the whatever. And then I was like, see, like it means like the top of the sky, Jupiter or moon Jupiter. And she was like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know, right? Isn't that so wild? Like I have a thing on my phone that shows me like exactly, relatively, exactly where
Right.
these things are happening. And it shows you something and it connects you to the sky again. Every morning, sorry, I'm going on a thing, but like I'm just, it makes me kind of emotional. But like every morning I wake up and I get up really early. I get up at like I leave my like the where I'm living at least at 4:30. And every morning recently, I walk out and immediately as I walk out walking toward my job, Jupiter, Mars. Right? Like that connects me to something beyond myself
Mm-hmm.
and to the movement of the planets in the sky.
So
And like,
if you're doing astrology and you don't actually look outside,
Mama, what are you doing?
if you're
It's
just
not the
doing
point.
astrology
It's
behind a
not
computer
the point.
screen, wrong.
Wrong. Incorrect. Genuinely. Sorry. I just had to go on a
I
quick
was like,
tangent. It's
no,
so
it's so
beautiful.
important. Like I think, and like this is obviously an even bigger tangent, but like astrology at its core is so anti-capitalist,
I love
and
that.
like it should be.
Yes, it
You
should be.
are effectively trying to reconnect
Connect yourself.
to a tradition that has intentionally been severed from you,
Yes.
and it is
As
so
being illogical and irrational
and
and
woo-woo.
therefore have no value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, that's how the like, I mean, truly colonizers like spoke about magical traditions and spiritual traditions of indigenous people across the world, right? Has severed them from their spiritual beliefs
Right.
and their practices. I mean, even you can see like, you know, the in the US where like we are like our medical system is like very specific and we only kind of engage in medicine from a very particular perspective. In France, you can go to the pharmacy and get holistic medicine. You can get like literally herbs, and they're like, here's the herbs you need to use for this.
Mm-hmm.
You can get the like, you can get like the medication. Certainly, absolutely, here's the option. And you know, medications are lovely, and I promote medication. I'm not
We
promoting.
believe in science.
We believe in science. We believe in medicine. We believe in medication. They also provide the herbal medicine because it's equal medicine. Like there's like it's all medicine, and I think that disconnection again from the earth, from these remedies. I mean, like it's funny how like herbalism is like not coming back. Obviously, it's been back for a while, but like in the Western world, in the white Western world in America, very specifically coming back in a popularity in this bigger way as an anti-science thing, where it's like, what's not the point? The point was the indigenous people and our like my ancestors created this as a way to help their community and as a way to be connected to the earth and the world around them and as a way to help the people, right, and to heal themselves and each other. And it's just, sorry, this is a long tangent. I get emotional about this stuff. It gets me
No,
really fired up.
Yeah, and it's like it like deeply unsettles me when I think about, I don't like to use the word normies in like an offensive way,
Sure.
but like you're just
You
like
realize
you're just like raw dogging it,
raw dogging it.
like you're not, I mean, not that you're not doing magic, because like not everyone has to do magic. Everyone should, but not everyone has to.
Yes.
But like you're just like you can't go out and look at the sky and be like, oh,
Oh,
look at
that's
this.
Jupiter.
Yeah. Oh, that's the waxing almost full moon.
Yeah.
Oh, the moon is full. It's gonna rise at this time probably.
Yeah.
Like it's just insane to me. Once again, so I mean, we didn't mention it so yet, but the solar principle that is connected to astrology. Like once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once it's brought to the light, it is brought to the light. So to wrap this all nicely, the light. So the fucking light.
Yeah.
We should have more on this in a later episode.
Yeah, we have.
It's like we have so much more to talk about, and it's
and it's like also magic isn't like it's not. Magic is whatever. Fine. If you grew up in any tradition, like whether it's Catholicism or like Episcopalian or many other traditions that are more ritual focused, my love, pay attention a little bit more, and you'll notice that's a ritual. Like you're doing magic. Like literally, the like entire ritual begins with music to stir your spirit.
Drinking the blood of Christ.
That's what I say. That's the peak of the ritual, right? That's when there's a transformation. The Eucharist is a transformation of a substance into something else that then boosts you internally and into your life, in your life. And you do it every single week. And the way the ritual starts
on a Sunday.
Mama, it's so obvious. Okay, we definitely have to talk about this in another episode. But like, it literally begins with music to stir your spirit, moves through different liturgy, brings you through music again, up to the peak of the ritual, which is taking the Eucharist and being blessed. No, the blessing is also a key part of that ritual, right? They go to this beautiful immaculate altar. They bless it with prayers they've used for thousands of years. 1,000 years, I think it's 1,000 years, like about 1,000, maybe 2,000 years. Yes, 2,000 years. And thousands of years. Sorry, I've lost myself for a second.
About 2020, about 2024, some would say. Just about.
Sorry, I like lost my. I second guessed myself for a second. Thousands of years. They've been doing this for, and then they use the same, and then they eat, and then everyone engages in that blessed food that is meant to be transformed. And there's actually different ideas of whether it actually changes into the. That's right.
That's when we get to the different denominations.
Yes, that's literally how many of the denominations were created, is whether it's actually transformed into something different or it's not. But anyway, that's beyond the point. That is a ritual. You're doing magic, mama. That's number one. But yeah, I mean, like the engagement in magic also too is like. Is not just like engaging in magic to make something happen. One thing that I have learned as I've gone through the process of like really and like taking like magic really taking over, magical and devotional practices taking over, I am less likely now to engage in something that isn't in alignment with what should be. And I am very accepting of the fact that I may want something that should not exist. And there is magic that does exist that forces something into being that shouldn't, regardless, which is magic you should be
weary of.
Exactly. But
I felt something when I said that, so I was like, ah,
yeah,
don't love.
Exactly. Like forcing things is possible, but like the magic that I've learned to engage with at this point is like, oh, I don't need to force things. I need to rise up in the moment when I really need to act, right? But like other than that, like the magic is really about connection and less about insisting on something. Anyway, long tangent that I absolutely love, and it will be another episode. So listeners, look out. But like, wow. Anyway, sorry. Yes, back to Rahu, etc.
I mean, yeah, we were just talking about the math, and that got us to that. I have like many other thoughts that I need to jot down, but
I know. Yes, I know. It's like racing in my brain. But I guess the thing that going back to the concept is that we're basically reset. Okay, so now, I mean, yes, with this concept of Rahu and Ketu and these like deceptive, necessary, like these,
for those that don't know, Rahu is the north node and Ketu is the south node.
Yes.
Keep going.
Sorry. Yes.
We've gone
yes,
this
yes.
long and I haven't mentioned that.
I haven't mentioned that.
Some of you use the
So-
white people names. So
The nodes of the moon, right? Like like the nodes that these calculated points that depict where the eclipses are.
where the
Right.
moon's path crosses the path of the sun directly.
Exactly. They happen to have this myth, specifically Rahu, mostly. Well, whatever. Specifically, they have this myth that associates them with deception, with like that's their initiation is starting.
Specifically, right? Yes, Rahu is the brain, so yes.
Yes.
Like Rahu is the head. So Rahu is the active, more like conscious
Yes.
being.
Yes.
I mean, we can get into a whole like Descartes thing about like mind versus body and like da da da. But
whether
like
that is actually a thing.
Whether that is a thing. But yeah, Rahu is like the brains behind the Zambarano operation of like let's get
Deceive.
this juice, mama. Yeah.
Right, and this idea of pulling wool over one's eyes as a way to not actually see what's clearly in front of us, which again is this concept of deception. Is this concept of and it has multiple. It's not always nefarious. Deception is not always nefarious. Sometimes it requires is required action with safety. So this idea came up. Right, we were like talking about this, and we're like, we want to dive into villains, and I'm like, again, so beautifully, charts started to pop up. So like one of the things that happened, two people came out with new documentaries. So Serena Williams came out with a new documentary on ESPN, and Simone Biles came out with a new documentary on Netflix, and like all of a sudden, like I
was just like from the jump, just thinking about this, two very martial women.
Wildly, right? Because they are the goats in their athletic arena.
The goats, the exaltation of Mars, crazy.
Period. Greatest of all time equals goats equals Mars exaltation. Literally, conspiracy theory. Anyway. But no, a bit right. Like this, like they are, and this is the thing in their description. So basically, this was my media watch. Right. So John's media watch was Traders. My media watch was these documentaries. They came out through so loudly, I cannot even tell you. And I was enthralled. So one of the documentaries, it wasn't the Serena documentary on ESPN wasn't actually the one that ended up like hitting all of the marks. I ended up watching it later, and it absolutely is still hitting all the marks. But the original one that I watched, which John also watched too, was Being Serena, which came out in 2018. And I'm watching this. And I'm like, what is her chart? Like, I have to look at her chart, Mars-Rāhu. Okay, so we go back and we talk about traders.
I would like to specify she has Mars-Rāhu in the Vedic chart.
Yes.
In her tropical chart, Rahu is at like 29 degrees of Cancer, and Mars is in like the middle of Leo. Right. Shifting to the Vedic chart, they're together.
Which is an important distinction. Again, I think largely it's important to say that she has Mars-Rāhu. I personally, and I think John, you would agree.
Para me.
Because there's so much more mythology for Rahu Ketu in the Vedic tradition, when there's conjunctions to one of the nodes, I take the visualization of the sidereal chart of whether they're together in the same sign more than I take it in the tropical. Actually, honestly, I exclusively take it in the Vedic because there's actually mythology around that. There's like strong designations, and that's where for me the overlap like kind of disappeared. I'm like, okay, I know actually in the sidereal zodiac like these are going to be together. So yes, in hers, they're going to have multiple examples in this show about different people who have it across the tropical versus Vedic, but like yes, this one it is kind of like exclusively like shown in the Vedic, in the sidereal zodiac, and so she has this, and I was like, okay, and then we, if we're going back again to traders, what did Peppermint have? Mars-Rāhu. And so I'm watching this documentary, and like, oh my gosh, like. John, I don't know. You most recently watched a documentary. What were because it's like fresh in your brain. What were your impressions of like experiencing the first two episodes of this doc, which were so incredible and so interesting? Please, give us your thoughts.
I mean, my like initial kind of reaction, I think pertaining to Mars-Rāhu specifically, was just like, first of all, she is like one of the most accomplished athletes of all time.
Yes. Yes.
And so
yes.
thinking about Mars athleticism and Rahu, like things needing to be extreme or like in your
Yes.
fucking face, like Mama Serena, like she's the one.
Her husband literally is quoted in the documentary saying, Serena just has another gear she can shift into both physically and mentally. I think that's a big reason why she's been so successful. She has, you know, like some cars, like the older cars have only 5 gears, and then the newer ones have 6. Like she has 8.
12.
Right? Yeah, she has 12, right? She has another space, and you can see it. You can see it.
Mhm.
And I honestly, I know, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. But like in the second documentary, in the documentary, the ESPN one, which I watched, like she's talking about these extreme moments where she's like losing it, where it's like she's just whatever. And then she gets so frustrated that all of a sudden it turns on, where it's like all of a sudden, and she just like it just like there's something that turns on as a result of like the struggle is necessary. Like the Mars, it's Mars. Like struggle, like getting to the point of like I cannot lose, so I have to win. I have to push through any obstacle. Like her agent says in the 2018 documentary, there's just no obstacle she hasn't been able to overcome. Like literally, I mean, so wild, this like extreme Mars, that energy that's just able to like punch into something. Sorry, I had to mention.
No, you're good. And then I was thinking about, we had talked prior at some point how everyone is like, she looks like a man, and trying to use it as like an insult.
Yes.
Which, I mean, yeah, men, disgusting, but you're saying it because you could never do what she's doing, first of all.
Well, you're expecting femininity from her, solely from femininity from her, right?
And she has her Mars-Rāhu conjunction is in sidereal Cancer. So Mars is fallen. Mars is this like, I need to prove myself. My experience with placements in fall is that there's this like, I need to prove it.
Yeah.
My Saturn in Aries.
I need to prove that I'm Marshall in this case. Or like Venus, I need to prove. Yes. Yes.
And it's with her Ruta Lagna, which when you
which means
which is the reflection of the ascendant, which you use the Ruta Lagna when you read the chart with the Ruta Lagna on the ascendant.
Yeah.
You are reading the chart of how you are perceived.
Yes.
She is perceived as someone with Mars and Rahu in the ascendant. Yeah, she probably looks like a man, whatever, like
muscular.
We can unpack that sentence for like years.
Yeah, no, right. Yes.
What you're saying is she has an incredible physique.
Yes.
She has Mars to an extreme, to a Rahu.
To an extreme. Well, and I think what's interesting about that, for extreme for a female perceived body or a woman perceived body, right? That's what it is, right? Because everyone before her in tennis, all women before her in tennis were tiny. And the same thing with Simone Biles. Every gymnast before her, slender little body. I mean, yes, there's like Ali Reisman, there's a few others, sorry. That's the first one that just came to my brain that I was like, well, I'm a little bit wrong. But traditionally, like all the people that we like kind of put into high esteem before the 2000s, right? Are all women that are very slender, very skinny, and are doing the sport, right? One of the quotes that like one of the commentators said about Serena specifically was that she sorry, what was the quote? It was so good. Sorry, I like wrote down so many things, but essentially, her ability to overpower the other women is hurting the game. She was so dominant that no one could beat her. Same thing with Simone Biles, who also, sorry, I haven't mentioned, also has Mars-Rāhu, and in, I think, tropical and Vedic, obviously together.
We'll confirm. Keep talking. We'll confirm.
Confirm. Okay, but I believe she does. But yes, it's in Aquarius. I want to say it's Aquarius. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm thinking.
She was born the same year as me, so she has Rahu is in tropical Virgo, and I think she was born during a Mars retrograde.
Virgo. It is Virgo. I'm thinking of another person with Mars. Yes.
But it's retrograde Mars because she's a Pisces sun.
Yes. Yeah. It is.
So it's retro. I was gonna say, like one of my best friends growing up was like.
Oh, that's right, because she's Pisces rising and Mars is in the 7th. Right.
Mars is in the 7th with retrograde Mars is in the 7th with Rahu.
Yeah.
And so like no wonder that people like her, just like her being causes like a stir.
Yes. Right. Both of them are, and I'm sorry, I'm not being as linear with this because I think I'm getting so excited. But it's just like they are two women who have absolutely dominated the field to the point where like their coaches and other people describe them as like being unbeatable. Like in the Simone Biles documentary that they did on Netflix, they literally describe her coaches like when there's so much going on. But essentially, her coaches are like, there will be no one like her for a generation. Like she is it. She's the singular. Like this is her. Like this is. There's no one going to be like her, right? And Serena, at the point of her peak, that was also true. There was no one coming up that could beat her. That was going to be like her. That was so dominant in the way that she was. And it was just wild to see her having both of them, these documentaries coming out, and both of them having these Mars-Rāhu, as we were talking about this Mars-Rāhu thing. And one of the key things about their lives is how much, specifically what you just said, like about Serena, where she looks like a man, or, the quote of her ability to overpower other women is hurting the game. Villainization of these women for their excellence. Marginalized people.
They're villainized because you bitches could never. Like literally
because you could never. And needing to provide that view of the villain, or some kind of like cheating even, right? In some way has to be like, how could she possibly be this muscular? Bitch, because she is. And honestly, Serena changed the game of tennis after that, because women started to be more muscular. Before, there was an expectation of being smaller. And now that expectation, because of Serena, is gone. How do you dominate the game? By being stronger than everyone else.
And like, I think, important thought, I think this idea of like being, I don't want to say the outlier, but being either like the first one or being like the different one is so Rāhu.
Yes.
We have this idea I would firmly believe that it is a modern evolutionary Western idea that was stolen from Vedic.
Sure.
About Aquarius being the weirdo, or like the outcast, because Rāhu rules Aquarius alongside Saturn.
Well, and also because it's like the place of like detriment for the sun. But yes.
Sure. I mean, I think when you bring it into a traditional lens, it can be explained that way.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. It doesn't exist in the modern sense. You're right.
I think it is more so in the modern stratosphere because of this idea of it, like Aquarius, the weirdo, whatever.
Uranus, etc. Yeah.
Right. Rāhu is one of the co-rulers of Aquarius in my tradition of Vedic astrology and in many traditions. So Rāhu does have this like, I'm a little different, or I'm gonna like break the mold, or this idea of things being unconventional is very connected to Rāhu. Yeah. It is the only planet that orbits that goes backwards. Like, it's always retrograde. There's this idea of things not being right, or things being different than what is expected. Yeah. And that is very connected to, I mean, both of these, Serena and Simone, and all the people that we have talked about. And at this point, like, they're doing things that either society deems as like not okay. Like Peppermint just existing as a trans woman.
Yes, right, exactly.
Not okay.
As a black trans woman.
As a black trans woman who does drag.
Who does drag, right.
Serena's physique, her ability, her everything, literally everything about her basically at this point. Yeah. People are like, she's fucking weird.
Yeah. Same thing with Simone Biles. I mean, one of the key to get related to that, one of the key things or the first line of the ESPN documentary that Serena says, it's lonely at the top. When you're the best, no one really talks to you. They kind of look at you and want what you have and know that they'll never get it as long as I'm there. Like, I love that. And then the other thing is that she says, she immediately, like very quickly into the documentary, only minutes, I think it's in the same intro paragraph. I didn't need to, like, she's talking about how, like, her being like an outlier. I didn't need to blend in. I needed to be different because I was different. I was something that no one had ever seen before, ever. I was stronger. I was faster. I was more emotional. I had muscles. Right? Like, she was like, just no one could achieve what she had. I mean, she had, right. I just want to name this: 73 singles titles, 4 Olympic gold medals, 16 Grand Slams in doubles, and 23 Grand Slam titles in singles. We're talking like just an absolute demolishment of like tennis prowess. in a
Insane.
way that, yeah, like just was unreachable prior to her.
And will probably be unreachable after her, to be completely honest.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, what were your other? I mean, there was the Being Serena documentary. Obviously, was like was really really fascinating. I think one of the key stories in the first two seasons. I mean, like that documentary starts with her being pregnant.
With her being
Like she kind of created the documentary around this kind of like almost. I don't know the motive quite. I feel like I have to finish the rest of it. Like I got through a lot of it, but I didn't get to the end to find the motive. But it seemed like it was a PR move to show she wasn't out of the game, right? Because she took time off because she was pregnant.
She was with child.
With child. Well, and one of the key things that she talks about in this Being Serena, she found out she was pregnant and then won. What was it? What match was it?
The one against her sister.
She won her 23rd Grand Slam in Australia against Venus. Yes, and she found that after finding out she was pregnant. What? Like what are you talking about? She reached her pinnacle while having a child. That's just, I mean, while being pregnant. Sorry, while finding out she was pregnant. That same day, like basically, she talked to her doctors, and they were like, "Well, I mean, you're fine.
They're basically like, as long as you feel fine, you're fine."
Yes, exactly.
And she was like, "Okay."
I mean, because the idea. I mean, she's already physically fit that like she's not exerting herself so far beyond her capability, so she's not going to harm the child, right? Like she's not ripping herself apart, right? This is what she constantly does. But yeah, what was your impression, more of your impressions of this documentary? I mean, like, and the impression of like the babies and like all her baby being born at this time, etc.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think her recorded time on her birth certificate is
Serena's
birth certificate is 8:28 p.m. Which
do you want to bring up that chart?
Yes, I'll bring up her given chart. Let me close a bunch of my tabs. For the people that are not watching the video version, the given birth information for Serena Williams is September 26th, 1981 at 8:28 p.m. in Saginaw, Michigan. And on Astrodienst, they cite her birth certificate having this recorded time of 8:28. Yeah. However,
watching this documentary,
her birthing experience was
so extreme.
Up until the actual labor.
Yes.
So fine.
Yes, up until the actual labor, so fine.
So literally so fine. She had to go in for an emergency C-section.
Yes.
She had to then go in for like 3 follow-up surgeries pertaining to either blood clots or like her stitches came undone. Like she did not have a pleasurable birthing experience whatsoever.
She literally almost died. And the doctors didn't catch what was wrong with her in the initial thing. So she has she's prone to blood clots, right? And she is prone to a lot. I mean, because of going into surgery would cause more blood clots is the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew that because she's had a lot of surgeries. Hello, Mars-Rāhu.
Because she's ruled by Mars.
Yeah, right. Because she's ruled by Mars. Exactly. Well, we're getting to that. This chart says she's ruled by Venus. Wild. At least in the tropical tradition, zodiac. And so so she's getting, and she basically she gets so she's prone to blood clots. She gets one. Then what happens is that she like can't breathe. Like it's so hard for her to breathe. She like wakes up one day and like she's like literally like I think it's the next day she can't breathe after the C-section.
I want to say it's like 3 or 4 days after, but
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Very soon after. I mean, first of all, what we're describing of all of these things that happened. She had to have 3 surgeries. She had all these blood clots. She had to pull like all these. That was a week. All happened within a week of when her daughter was born. But I mean, extreme 7 days of post birth, right? And she ended up, she's like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And she's like, they did all these tests and went into exploratory surgery. They took out blood clots and they said, no, there's no pulmonary embolism. And she was like, I can't breathe. I know I've had a pulmonary embolism before. That's what this is. Hundo P, you need to go back in there, do a CAT scan with contrast and with dye, and like you'll see it.
Which feels so first of all, that awareness of her body,
Yes.
Moon in Virgo in the 6th, like having such
Mm.
a strong intuition, essentially, or a strong
Yes.
feeling about what
Yeah.
is wrong, and
Yeah.
understanding that on such like a deep and profound level.
Yeah.
Very much to me, part of me,
Would be Moon in the 6th.
would be Moon in the 6th.
On her, the given birth chart, it's Moon in the 5th, right? Moon in Virgo in the 5th, because she's a Taurus rising with that Moon in the 5th. And so we're seeing this documentary, John and I, and we're like, and I'm texting when I watched it, then like John watches it after, and I'm just like, there's no way. There's just no way. And then I was like, there's no way she's a Taurus rising. Then I'm watching this documentary thinking about, I'm like, what is her daughter's birth chart? We have a time for her birth chart. And what does her daughter have? Tropically, and therefore also Vedically, Mars in Leo with Rahu. So Serena's birthing experience included Mars-Rāhu in what would be her 4th. And you're like, I mean, sure. And like, John, you mentioned it, like legacy, like endings, all that. If she had died, maybe that would have been like an accurate, sure, it's in the 4th. Okay, sure. But she didn't, right? Thankfully. And so I'm like, okay, such an extreme birthing experience, reflecting like a synodic cycle with Mars-Rāhu. Like, I mean, 5th. It's the 5th house.
It's
the 5th house.
Mars-Rāhu in the 5th.
And
what's happening?
It was happening. And so we ended up looking at the Vedic chart, and we were looking specifically, I think it was, yes, oh right, it was the D9 chart, the Souls chart. And I was like, Mars-Rāhu has to be, like, the options were limited, obviously, because you can't go too far outside of the birth time because it's not likely to be different. But the shift was like 8 minutes, right? Something like that?
Yeah.
8 or 9 minutes?
Yeah. So let me share the Vedic chart now. This is the given birth time. We get Mars is in the exalted Mars.
Yes.
Is in the 8th.
In the D9 of the D9.
The D9, which the D9 planets in the 1st, 5th, and 9th are planets more or less, some stronger than others, planets that you inherit skills with in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And like Saturn in the 1st, K2 in the 9th, like
Saturn, she could be good at magic or math if she had a really good
K2
teacher.
K2 would give either magic, math, computer programming,
astrology.
Saturn gives things in a tradition. So like she isn't born into like a legacy of tennis players.
Right. Yeah.
She doesn't do anything like connected to Saturn. Like
like farming.
Nothing. Like I can't think of a single Saturn thing that I would associate with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were like, oh my God.
8 minutes earlier.
You know what's crazy? If you go to 8:20 and 53 seconds. Oh, so true. The exalted Mars moves into the 9th. And she learned tennis from her teacher.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, who was Mars-Rāhu? Oh, I know who that was. Never mind. I'm so wow. We're just ping-ponging around. Yes, sorry, keep going.
But like it's Mars exalted. Mars in strongest dignity level.
Yes. Yeah.
In the 9th.
In Vedic exaltation, we should mention exaltation and fall are like really important. So fall is like
the pinnacle on both ends of planetary condition.
Exactly. So exaltation is the highest you possibly can achieve. And fall is the lowest, unfortunately. And so having so funny that I thought it was Mars-Rāhu. I remember exactly who it was that was Mars-Rāhu now. But having these trines, right? So in the 1st, 5th, and 9th, they say the gifts that you're meant to have. So the first, right, John, is like the ones that you come into this life that are just like innate, like you just get it right away.
Born with from day one.
5th is you just have to work at it.
Yeah,
like it's a gift you have. You just have to.
It's like it can be like self-studied. It's like I can do this on my own. I can learn how to. If it's the sun, I can learn how to play an instrument. If it's the moon, I can learn how to sing. Whatever.
Yes.
But like I don't really need this assistance of another person.
Other people.
I can do it.
Yes. And then the 9th is it's a gift you have if you have the right teacher, or if you have a teacher that can bring it to you. And so one of the key things is that Serena did not start out being really great at tennis. In fact, Venus Williams, her sister, was the prodigy. Immediately understood it, was like a brilliant tennis player, and Serena never saw herself as bad or good, just like She was never going to be Venus. That's what it was.
Mhm.
And so I think in the ESPN documentary, she's like, I knew I could just never beat Venus unless I cheated, which is funny. Another Rahu thing. She's like, and so the way I would cheat was like, if any ball was on the line, I would call it out. That's the only way I could beat her because she was so naturally good. And so it took her learning and like the way she talks about learning too, which is interesting. I mean, we can look at this. You could find this in the D9, but and I'm sure it's probably there. But it's like her teacher was her dad, absolutely 100%. But her teacher was also her sister. The way she talks about watching every single match that Venus did, and she's just like zoned in what she did well, what she did poorly. She like would watch her. And honestly, what was so interesting is the impact. I didn't realize this before, but the impact that Venus had on her to become, that Venus had on Serena to become great through that relationship of watching, and also her being like, she ended up Venus, because Venus was like becoming the one that was well known first. She was Serena was her hitting partner to help her be able to just like naturally like, okay, I'm gonna hit this back to you and you have to hit it again. Like that's it was like, so she was learning tennis through her sister and through this like engagement of like constant watching, which is really fascinating. So again, like one could say her dad was absolutely her teacher 100%, but there does seem to be this like strong, her teacher, the activation of that exalted Mars in the ninth came from her sister, which is really fascinating. But yeah, we saw this.
And if you look at Venus's chart, her given time is 212 at 212 and 11 seconds. She has Mars in Scorpio, Mars in Dignity in the in the fifth.
Yeah, because she's like, oh, I just had to work at it. Yeah, whatever. I can do this.
I can do this.
Doesn't she have? Wait, doesn't she have Venus? Where does she have Venus?
In the D9 or in the?
Yeah, I think doesn't her. I forgot because I knew because obviously her name is Venus, and then I was like, oh, there's a really prominent Venus.
She has Venus. Well, in the D1, like in her birth chart, Venus is in Taurus and is the Amakarka.
Oh, that's what it was. It was her Amakarka, and I was like, oh, of course.
Of course,
someone named Venus.
Her name is literally Venus.
Yeah, Venus in Taurus, and is like the planet that she has the most karma with. Oh yeah, I mean, sure, yeah, duh. Obviously. But yeah, no, this like domination of like, so but both of them, being so dominant in this sport, having these prominent Mars in their D9, which is just, I mean, really, really powerful. But we watched this documentary and having all this difficult childbirth things. I mean, she still, and then one of the, I don't know if you remember this, John, but like then right after a week of excruciating, awful, life-threatening moments of childbirth, she gets into the car for the first time and they have their baby. She's strapped in and she goes, I think we should have another baby. And I was like, ma'am, sit down.
Take a seat.
Down. I mean, there's just a tolerance for one thing I wrote down was like she had such a tolerance for danger, for fear, for pain that makes her like impervious to be. Oh, you know what? This might be a quote. There's a tolerance for danger, fear, and pain that can make. Oh no, I think it was me. It can make one impervious to being shut down by those things. Right? There's this like powerful Mars experience that she's like that. You go through all like these two like episodes, and she's just like persevering. There's strength, the like physical strength that she's built that she didn't actually innately have, which is so fascinating. She talks about it in the ESPN one, where she's just like, I wasn't as strong as Venus. I just wasn't, and like they just did not come naturally to me. And so she built this deep strength through having to persevere, through having to struggle. She talks about like with regard to having her first pulmonary embolism and returning not as strong, and like her game just being off after that. She said, but the struggle was important, I think, because it was just another way to build strength. Losing as much as winning, having to battle for every match, every game, every point, that made me stronger. So there was just this like constant, through both documentaries, being Serena and this other one on ESPN, there's just this constant discussion of struggle being the thing that led her to her greatness. And it's just and then one of the things, so her daughter Olympia, was born with Mars-Rāhu, right?
Obviously, yes.
And she literally describes her being born and her arms were stretched out in victory pose. She came out of
It's
the
crazy.
C-section and she's literally arms, fists up into the air, both of them like this. Mars, like the triumphant, like, because it was such an extreme labor. And the triumphantness of coming out, having Mars-Rāhu in your chart and being so triumphant that your body comes out of your parent with your victory pose. Like, how cool is that shit? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And then they named her Olympia because Olympia means strength, quote, and we want her to be strong more than anything else.
Oh my, you have Mars in the 5th.
Crazy. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful astrology. But yeah, going back to, I guess, the thing that we're talking about here, right, is this, yes, there's this powerful strength, but there's also this like villainizing of her because she was so great and no one could reach her. So they had to knock her down. They tried to try to knock her down or have it be unfair that she's just so strong and that like is ruining the game because like no one can beat her. That's not fun for television. So, or it's not fun for the game. So her being so dominant is like ruining everything. And this villainization, right, that happened to Peppermint, that absolutely happened to Simone Biles, right? Equally happened to her when she had to step down from the all-around in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics that happened in 2021. But she could not perform. This person who had like dominated absolutely everything from every single championships. This is the craziest thing. Every single championship that Simone has been in, she's won. What?
Literally insane.
I mean, and because of like the way people online during that moment, and it was in the Simone Biles documentary, she talked about this. People were like, I can't believe you gave up on your team. You're ruining it. Like you're letting down the United States. You're letting down your country. I can't believe you. You're weak. You're blah. And she was like, she says in the documentary, meanwhile, these men were like sitting on their couch. I was at the Olympics. What do you mean? It's just, I mean, it was so wild watching these three documentaries, really.
She was like, I have K2 in the first. I don't give a fuck.
I don't give a
actually
fuck. Truly.
What you have to say about me.
And she just, they're such two dominant like women in sports that have been so deeply villainized for either both winning and also not winning or just like letting someone down or having to take care of themselves. Such an interesting concept too of like Mars-Rāhu and like presenting not as strong, like, or presenting just to people as potentially weak just simply by taking care of yourself, right? Like doing a lunar thing, right? Like having to do a lunar thing to protect yourself. People are like, demonizing, like immediately demonizing you. And how interesting that experience must have been. I mean, obviously she talks about it being really, really difficult, right? Like just really, really awful in her first mental health. And not just like what people were saying, but like she was so dominant in her sport and it took her multiple years to like not be in her head about things. And one of the key things, I'm not like this is not recorded. So we have now arrived at a moment where we're realizing it's been an hour and a half.
It's been like 90 minutes.
We love you guys.
Did not feel that way.
No, it didn't. I mean, today apparently we're very non-linear. Our ADHD is existing all over the place.
Moon with Rahu said your mind's gonna go
everywhere. And honestly, I mean, beautiful things that we've been talking about. I love the tangents that we've been going on. There's so many beautiful gems, and we want to be able to like keep those, right? Yes, an alternative is to like re-record this and get it like really structured. But we like what we've done. But why? And so instead, we're going to split this into two parts. And we'll let you know when the second part comes out. But we want to let you know that like this is going to be the first part. This is our introduction to the Mars-Rāhu concept. And we're going to have more discussions about more people who have these beautiful placement of Mars and Rahu and how they've struggled with and also persevered through this difficult placement. And as well as discussing more remediation and yeah, remediative techniques for queer people and marginalized people who have specifically Mars-Rāhu, but or specifically, you know, Rahu or sorry, the nose. The nose prominently in their chart. The nards prominently in their chart or with conjunctions with planets. Because this is something that like John and I really, really care about is remediation. And helping queer and marginalized people get through this. Like, how do we like remediate and make better and make easier these experiences through our life? And this is something that we have like, you know, worked really hard on. John, you know, in Vedic and like what he's learned, like Vedic is so much to do with remediation, naturally with remediation. And my teacher, one of my teachers, Austin Kopic, also studies Vedic astrology with your teacher. And so for a lot of what I've learned and what I've come into is also a concept of remediation and magic and these devotional practices that lead to better outcomes, despite, yeah, our placements in our chart. So we're really excited to delve deeper in what
there's just this there's a quote that I'm being like reminded of, which Alaska Thunderfuck, who won season All Stars 2 of Drag Race, says, if you're not wearing nails, you're not doing drag. Which like true.
First of all, true.
So I'm gonna like reappropriate that as like, if you're not doing remediation, you're not really doing astrology. You are. You're not doing like you are not having like an embodied experience practice.
Yes.
You can, I mean, and this is once again a different conversation we can have at some point. Western astrology completely can divorce from the spiritual. You can have a completely objective, stoic perspective on the movement of delineations, just like, and how it affects you.
Yeah.
Vedic cannot.
It's literally inseparable.
They are the same. You have to do you have to do the magic, you have to do the remediation, you have to have the spiritual component.
That is the part of struggling to be alive, is engaging with remediation and magic and the gods. That is literally the concept. And so yeah, that's what we're doing with this episode, is just like desire. We John said this when we paused, but like this is so Rahu, like we are embodying the archetypes. This happens. This is like Chris Brennan has honestly talked about this, and he's not even a magical girly. But others have too, where it's like there's sometimes when you talk about particular placements, you embody them as you're doing that as a representation of the placement. And we certainly engaged in that with this episode, but we're so excited about about what we've done and what we're going to continue to do. So we will see you at the next parts. We love you very much. Subscribe to our Patreon.
Subscribe to our channel. So book readings.
Book readings with us. Like, we love a Leo sale. I'm doing one.
Crazy.
We love you. We'll see you later. Bye.